So let's get started. I guess you probably know the homework is due tomorrow at 5 p.m. So make sure you submit your homework. The TA will grade your homework, and as she said in the first class, you will be just graded by attempt. So if you did a serious attempt, right, then you would get full credit. Okay, by serious attempt is not say I don't know how to do it, then done, right? One sentence, then probably it's not considered serious attempt, right? So, but as long as, I mean, it's very clear whether you did it or you actually not doing anything, but should be clear that, and then after the next class at the end, then you will have optional tutorial. So you talk about the questions and discuss with you what you need to do is optional. So you might or might not attend, so it's up to you. I will be in this class. So then the goal today is to finish this producer. I think we can finish this one because this is very similar to the consumer. So we would look at the things very similarly. And if you have time, it probably will go to the next topic as well, because producer is not very complicated. It's just very similar to consumer, but actually even easier. Okay, you will see there's much less complication. And of course, the simplicity comes from assumption, the fact that the firm is a price taker in its factor market and product market. In that sense, it simplifies a lot, right? Because if so simple, then what are we doing in B school, right? So B school just go open a box of the firm and then go into details on each aspect of the business and go into very detail. And in order to go there, then we require game theory that will be reserved for the second half of this course. We open up the box and go in and see how to make sense of the producer and how well this is being made. For the time being, we're happy with the profit maximizing firm. Okay, it's a price taking. And first, we study production technology, and then last class talk about the production possibility set. And that would be too complicated for our purpose, so we simplify to single product firm. So everything can be boiled down to a function instead of a set. Okay, but you can easily see that everything can be expanded to multi-product firm. Okay, and then we go to cost function, and then we study how the cost minimization or profit maximization problem, which you have learned it in your principal class at the beginning, but now we even go to the math. And then at the end, we talk about product surplus, and this different on consumer surplus is a very clear definition of that. Okay. And we will show how, in particular, the math technique is you will see the firm is actually profit maximizing. So the big problem for the firm is to maximize profit. But actually, we will consider the reduced problem, which is called cost minimization, which is much easier. Okay, and then after you solve the easier problem, you can solve the bigger problem. So that is some technique that we want to show you. And there's some technique also we talk about long run and short run, which also appear in your undergraduate class, but it's not clear what is long run and short run. But when we actually talk about maximization problem, it becomes very clear immediately. It's just very simple idea of what are the variables you can optimize over. But we'll talk about that very quickly. Okay, so don't worry if you understand the consumer or you have done your homework, then shouldn't be a big thing. Okay, so just remind you that we focus on profit maximizers. Of course, some people talk about the market share maximizer or whatever, but that will be long run. They want to maximize profit as well. So that would be at least true for the long run. Okay, and we're talking about long run behavior actually in this class. So the short run thing, we call game theory. Okay, and just remind yourself what would be the production, right? That is actually the very similar consumption, right? In consumption is where you transform your goods or commodity into utility. That is what we call utility function, right? So production function is transform input to output. Okay. And this is more complicated than consumer, in the sense that consumer just have utility one thing, right? But the firm potentially have more than one output, right? So that's why to present the production plan or the technology frontier, right? So we will have to use a more generic thing. You have an M types of commodity, right? Now we extend to the case where we are now negative. Negative means input, right? So we don't allow that when we have consumption, right? Consumption is always positive, right? But when production, the input is negative, the output is positive, right? So suppose the example we have seen is -1, 2 is you use 1 unit of good 1 to produce 2 units of good 2. So this is something obvious. And so if everything is possible, then of course there's no technology restriction, but we do know that how many unit good you can produce depends on how many unit you can put in, right? So it would be restricted to a subset of the Euclidean space of m dimension, and you do notice that there are no positive here, which means that can be negative positive, right? And possibly you also mentioned this idea, right? If you have, suppose it's two-dimension case, right? Y1 and Y2, right? And you do notice, to remind you that this space is never possible. Okay. Because we assume later you will see that is, you can't produce something from nothing, right? So that is the first thing. And if you throw away stuff, okay, to the rubbish bin, then this is also possible, right? Because this is basically throwing stuff to rubbish bin, right? Don't produce anything, you destroy, right? It's just like terrorists, right? You just throw away thing, explode thing, blow up stuff. Okay. Of course, the real thing comes from this two dimension, right? This two area, right? Maybe use other color, right? So the blue color is using 1 to produce 2, right? Green is using 2 to produce 1, right? So these are possible, right? And the frontier simply means that usually technology will tell you what are the possible, right? So usually it will be something like use this much of 1, the maximum you can produce 2, right? So something like you have more, you can produce more. So usually you will see something like this, and you allow this to be happening. Similar in this idea, maybe something like this, right? So usually the set will be something like the following color. Maybe I use, I don't know what color, yellow, right? So with something like this, right? The frontier there will be some yellow there, right? So the whole yellow will be Y. Okay? It's a set that you can always produce, okay? With the set, but okay. And I hope that's okay. I mean, this is not something terribly difficult if you understand the meaning of this notation. But almost every math extends to this general logic. Okay, of course, for some result you need to some assumption, but make our life easier, so we just focus on single output. But do remind you that this is a very important restriction. Okay, that something holds, something doesn't hold. But well, for our purpose, I guess it is enough to focus on single Y. Okay, and you can imagine there's a composite good here, so it should be more or less okay. It's not something too big restriction, but do remind you that things can be extended. So if you focus on single output, that means that we can use two different notation here and use positive number, right? Instead of negative for input. So I use only single Y for its output with a positive number. And the inputs are n-dimensional vectors. So I use n because this coincide with the consumer, so make our life easier. So production function, instead of a set, right? Now I only care about a function, right? Because this is the maximum you can produce. We allow free disposal. So you can produce and throw away. So that's why we just focus on what maximum you can do, right? Because we allow things to be flow. So that is a function, right? Otherwise, the correspondence, right? We focus on the maximum, right? So suppose you have 1 unit of labor and 3 unit of capital, you can produce 5 unit good, say, for example, right? But it's also can produce 4 unit good, right? Because you can flow the 1 unit in the rubbish bin, right? So that's why it's a function, okay? It's an n dimension to 1 dimension, right? Give me all the input, I give you the output, right? And you allow flow away, so you don't need to specify the set. You just focus on a function, so make our life easier. Okay, there's some assumption here, right? You can always flow away stuff, and do note that flow away stuff is possible, right? And you think about free disposal is possible, right? But that is not always the case, right? And indeed, actually, there's a lot of time that free disposal is not available. Like for example, probably in production of I don't know, electricity power, right? And turn out that you can't store the power. So you produce more energy than you can store. You can keep. Okay, you can send out. Then you have to have some way to use it. Okay, and that's why in some place in the world, right, when there are a lot of sunshine, right, the solar plant have to pay you to get the power, the negative price. Okay, because you have too much, right? There's no free disposal there. Okay, so that happens. So when this kind of thing happen, then your usual thing breaks. So that's why the paper that study what does that mean, right? When the price becomes negative. Okay, one of the reason why is like you can't really stop because the machine is running, right? At the constant speed. If you change the production level, then actually it's more costly than you restart again, right? Just like probably know the production of steel, right? It's like you can't really stop. So it's a short run and long run problem, of course, but you see this kind of problem. So free disposal is not a innocuous thing. Okay, there's something that related to that. But anyway, that is something that I want to mention because that paper studying those. So that's why I want to tell you that free disposal is not something non-trivial. There's something at least in some aspect, in some cases, in some industry, people do talk about those. And I think 10 years ago, I go to a conference, they start to talk about the negative energy price and how to manage it because the usual tools in, say, operation management or optimization problem just focus on positive energy price. What happened negative, then things will be different, right? So, and I think the same is like in price become negative is also possible in financial market, right? I guess in a few years ago, right, we have option pricing for the oil, and then they become negative, right? It's not the same as some storage problem goes on there, but let's not get into that too much detail. But if you go back to undergrad cases, usually you have a capital labor case, right? That's what your undergrad will see. That would be just capital labor, right? But now we are in the graduate school, right? So more general, we have an n dimension thing. So if you ask how our class different from undergrad, that is we extend it to n dimension inputs. Okay. Now we have to make some assumption on the production function, right? That's same as I make some assumption on the utility function, right? If you remember, what we assume for our preference is monotonic, continuous, convex, right? Strictly convex to get the demand function there, right? If you still remember, hopefully you remember. If not, check your slide again. So now we make some very similar assumption there, right? We again, to make this function continuous, okay? Strictly increasing is monotonic, right? So I think this, I think it's nothing very big. It's like you increase or input, right? You have more output. So it's not very crazy, right? Of course, you have free disposal, so it's okay, right? And it's not a big deal, right? Strictly concave, that is same as what we said is your preference is a convex, then you will lead to this one. But later we'll see what do you mean by strictly caustic concave. Okay, that is actually same as idea that of our preference is a convex, but later you see. But the idea is like if you combine the two production plan, actually you increase the production. Okay, same as your preference, right? Remember the consumer. If you're too good, that is two bundle the same to you. You mix them, it's always better off. Then it's a convex preference lead to caustic concave utility function. Same here, right? If you assume your production follow the same idea, you have that. Okay? Again, that's because of you want to have a the optimization problem will need to use this solution, right? And here the last one, I guess we have mentioned already many times. Zero should be always in the frontier, right? You have the option to do nothing. Okay. And then if you're nothing, you can produce nothing, all right? So that is, I don't think that would be something too terrible. I think that is everything is like similar to what we have in consumer. Okay. So some terminology here. Average product average product for input I will be just the function divided by how many units you use for I. So nothing new there, but just connect to yourself. If some of you take a macro, then will be average product of labor, average product of capital will be like this. Okay, so this is some terminology here, and here we also have another one with marginal product, which something is not too surprising because this is closely related to marginal utility, right? In the consumer, you have consumer annual unit, how much utility goes up, right? That is a marginal utility. And this is a marginal product. It's just like same, right? You increase one more unit of input of I, how much output you increasing, right? So that will be exactly the same idea there, okay? And later you will see it's a very crucial concept, right? The marginal thing, because optimization problem will be related to that one as well. So also this is something you learn in the undergrad is we usually assume the F is strictly concave, right? And stronger than its quasi concave. And this will deliver us something we used to see in undergrad is the diminishing marginal product, okay? Which essentially same as the consumer, right? If you consume something more and more and more, the additional happiness it carry to you reduce, right? Same as you keep increase labor, right? I mean, if you increase a lot, then the extra unit they can produce will be reduced, right? Basically, it's just like the other factors are more even now, right? So suppose you have a one person there, you have one computer, maybe okay, right? Maybe supercomputer even, right? Then, but if you're more and more people there, then it start have congestion there, then it slow down, right? So that would be some idea here. This other factor being dragging down your speed because other factor remain constant, right? Remember, you're keeping only increase one input, but the other input holding constant, right? At the end of the day, right? So there's a bottleneck there. Okay, so that would be the idea. But you learned that in the undergrad, right? So I think that's a something I remember many years ago. I read Stephen Zhang the paper. He said, I mean, if you put a farmer into a poor land, right, and then one person, then you farm there, then you grow some crops, right? Grow some apples, and then you put two farmers there, maybe you increase, right? And you put 1,000 farmer there, maybe also okay. But if the 1 billion farmer there, no one can produce anything, right? Because everyone is stuck there, right? So, right, so that is the idea. Because there's more people, then I mean there's nothing you can do, right? Become like this, it congests. So here, I mean, probably this is something you also learn in the intermediate micro, but not the principal class. It's called isoquant. The isoquant is the same idea as indifference curve, right? So along this production frontier, then they have the same output, right? Because that is the collection of the input that deliver to the same output level y. So this is how you read. I mean, this is qy, right? It's a set equivalent to a set that is a collection of input such that produce the same output. Okay, but the same is indifference curve, right? It's a set of input that deliver the same utility to the agent. Okay, and this typical indifference curve look like this, right? So there's a line. If you produce y1 like this, right? Because remember, if you two input, that would be actually a three-dimensional space, right? But it's hard to draw it, but that's how we draw it, right? This is representing the control map or the same level output. And you see this, when I draw this, okay, you have reminded what assumption we make here. Okay, first, if we say y3 is bigger than y2, bigger than y1, right? So we are saying that is monotone or strictly increasing, right? That's the first assumption we make, right? And second thing we make is quasi-concave, so that's why you have this one, right? This shape, right? If you take a point here, take a point there, so in the same isoquant, anything in the middle is better than them, right? So that is strictly quasi-concave. And you probably can't draw continuous here, but what noise to draw continuous here? And 0 is already there, right? 0. So if this is Q0, then we have all the information there. Is that clear? So basically, if you put Q0 here, say, all right. So this is Q0, okay? And you increase in this direction, right? So, and assume there's some continuity there, right? Basically just a three-dimensional thing, just things go up smoothly, right? There's no discontinuous jump, there's no cliff, right? Then this is what we are wanting for our production function there. Now, once we have that, then we can go on and talk about this guy. And this guy is related to what we have learned. So substitution is same as the consumer. Exactly the same thing. Is how consumer one of the most important thing in characterizing equilibrium is marginal rate of substitution, MRS, which is the marginal utility ratio difference, the ratio, right? MU1, MUI over MUJ, right? So this is the same, but instead of consumer is trading off is utility, right? Here is trade off over its output production, right? So marginal rate, technical substitution, we have T here is because represent technology, right? It's like MP over MPJ. What does that mean, right? So what is MPI stand for? MPI stand for if you increase or decrease 1 unit of I, how much output you're getting or losing, right? Because it's defensible, right? So it doesn't really matter, you go the other way around, right? So whether you are talking about increasing 1 more unit or decreasing 1 more unit, the same thing, right? So we focus on the case, say, suppose I reduce, right? I take away 1 unit of input I, how much output I would reduce, okay? And the question is, I'm looking at the isoquant here, right? So I'm looking at, so suppose I take away 1 unit of I, how many J I need to add to make sure that my output remains the same. And the idea is to divide MPJ, right? Because there is how many good you can produce, right? By having 1 unit of J, right? Then divide by that. That will be this expression, right? In short is, if I want to keep output constant, I take away I and how many J I add back to make sure the same. So basically, it's just like the internal exchange ratio for the firm, right? I have to say I keep the same output. If I swap I and J, what's the ratio? I take away 1 unit I, how many J I need, right? To make sure that I am the same isoquant there. Okay? Or you can write this parcel, or you can write it this way, right? So, and that would be the idea, right? So why so quiet? And maybe I skip this thing. Do I need this one? Yeah, I don't think I need this one. So focus on this one. And this return to scale you often see in macro class. Okay? And also this is assumption we need to make to understand when later we talk about market equilibrium. So what does that here means is if you so far we talk about changing one particular input I and input j, okay, at the same time, one increase, one decrease, right? How they trade off. Here is like if you double all the inputs, okay, is it going to double all the output? Say, is it you produce twice the amount of output or less than twice the amount of the output? Okay, if you double the input, you double the output, that's a constant return to scale, right? Because that it means T is a constant, you double everything, input, is it output to be double the same amount, right? So it's replicate, right? And if that's the case, there's constant return to scale, okay? And if you have more than one, then it's increasing the scale. Less than one, you're decreasing return to scale, okay? And this is the assumption you learn in the, I guess you probably learn in the intermediate class, principal class. We always think economies should be working at constant return to scale, decreasing to scale. Why? Right? If, say, for example, if it's increasing return to scale, right, we should see only one firm. Not because it's more efficient to combine everything in the same firm. Right? So why? Because firm are price taker anyway in the fractal market. So he would hire as many as they want, combine the single firm. Right? And do remember that when we have this kind of theory is in the hundreds ago, right? 1900, right, or 1800, right? At that time, actually there's no single firm that control the whole market, right? I mean, the monopoly thing comes in the 1900, right? When the U.S. have railway and then the big company comes in, right? Before that, it's actually firms are in different city, right? And no single firm is in the national scale, right? But after that, they figure out the railway, right? This kind of thing, I mean, allow increasing return scale up to some extent, right? But still, you didn't see monopoly of a lot of stuff, right? Still farmers and grocery is like each location with their own thing, right? Not everything is nationalized in that aspect. And people tend to think, right? At least in traditional economy, you should expect to see constant return to scale and decreasing return to scale, which would fit our intuition, right? But of course, these days because of internet, right? Actually, this only happened in these few years. You will see especially increasing return to scale, right? Because everyone is going to Tmall, everyone goes to Pinduoduo, goes to Taobao, right? Basically, all the shops there are done, right? And also, even for restaurant, right? It's return scale, right? Now the restaurant is not cooking, right? Every food is prepared in the central restaurant, right? Cooked in 1 year ago, right? Then they send you to a store, they use microwave oven to give you the food, right? So why? Because increasing return to scale of the food, right? Because you have to hire a chef and clean the food is very costly, right? So that's why almost now all the food is ready-made, right? Even you go to restaurant, it's also ready-made, right? So that is because of increasing retail, right? But of course, I don't know what happened in China now, but whatever. Everything looks like increasing return to scale. Basically, what you see is a concentration of market power there, right? So you see everything is in the national scale because of increasing return scale, right? Of course, you will ask the question why things doesn't go beyond the boundary of, say, nation, right? You will see big company in China, big company in US, but not whole world, right? Because there's across the country boundary were different from the within country, right? But that is idea of international trade, right? Because when you have to go over from one country to the other, there are a lot of costs to overcome, right? So that's why there's some issue there. But otherwise, in the classical economics, we assume decreasing return to scale. Even constant return to scale is some issue there. Okay, but these days with internet, also the global supply chain issue, then it become decreasing return to scale. Because also machine also makes everything, you can easily scale up quickly a lot of time. But do remind you that our model, at least in classical sense, we focus on these two. Okay, at least decreasing return to scale. When you have these two, you will end up more likely the market will have only one firm, right? Sometimes called natural monopoly, right? Like Google, right? So only search engine of Google, right? And same as many other things, right? Say in China, right? Most people use WeChat, I guess, right? No people use QQ anymore, right? I mean, the same idea goes on, right? Because QQ, once they install that, then the production is actually increase a little bit, right? Increase the server a little bit, right? And for this way much more stuff, right? The cost of serving one more customer is very minimal, right? So that's why it's like increasing return to scale is going on, at least in computer aspect, right? The most expensive comes from serving the first customer, but after that it's almost like zero, right? Or like software, right? You write the first software, someone buying a software, or you design a game, you produce a game that only played by one guy, and played by infinite many guys. That's no different, right? At least for production side, right? So that's why these are increasing return to scale, right? So that's why the software is almost like increasing return to scale, right? Just basically you can see like Photoshop is like only one single firm producing a lot, right? And same for many other things as well. Now, next is talk about homogeneity, okay? And if you learn math in the college, right, you notice very often we mention about homogeneity of the function, and that has some property there, right? There's Euler equation if you learn the calculus, and this is what is said is double everything, right? And you take lambda to k, right? You just take it out and then you raise to the power k. That is called homogeneity k. This is not economics, but this is just math definition, okay? And turn out that if you see this is exactly return to scale idea, right? If k is 1, okay, that is constant return to scale, right? If k is bigger than 1, it's increasing return to scale, right? And k is less than 1, that will be decreasing. But I guess that's what we mean. But I will forget the next slide. But if you know Euler's theorem, okay, it means that if it's constant return to scale, it's homogeneous degree in one input, but that will be homogeneous degree of 0 in the marginal product. That is a standard implication from the Euler's equation. But I'm not going to go in detail because I think it's the math result. So probably you can forget about this one. But just let you know this equation there. So why we want to learn this math result? I mean, what's the point with us? Okay, we'll ask, okay, why we want to care about the math thing? The main thing is about this result. Okay. So remember, we already assume f is continuous. This is certainly f0 certainly increasing and certainly cos concave. This we assume in the beginning. Okay. So one thing is we assumption is this is homogeneous in degree alpha from 0 to 1, right? So it's just like not means that constant in the scale, right? Or you like it's decreasing in the scale. If you make this assumption, then f is concave. Okay. So now we tell you why we have assumed undergrad that's a concave. Okay. Actually, we have the constant return scale idea or decreasing return scale idea. So we have to accept this 3, right? This 4, right? This is something I think it's okay. It's not very controversial, right? But I'll tell you what are the caveats. And this is decreasing return to scale or constant return to scale, right? You don't have integration to scale. Then this is a concave function. This is, if you look at single input, single output, the curve look like this, right? The concave function. It's not convex, it's concave, right? So that's, we have been assuming and we've been using through our life. It's like this, okay? And this do remind you one thing is concavity will be, if you want to violate concavity, you also violate this, right? So if you don't like concavity, you have a convex function, then you will have a increasing return scale, right? So that would be something in your mind. If you want to model internet thing, then you have to figure out which one to violate, right? Because internet will violate this guy, right? Then you have to think about which one doesn't fit your model. I guess that is something you have to think, okay? Which one should fit your case, right? Because you think concave doesn't apply to your case, right? It must be. Some of them doesn't work very well, right? Because these are all very natural things. But my point to you would be this, right? Is the equation given to scale, right? I don't think you want to drop this 4, right? Maybe it's okay to drop this one, but usually I would think you drop this guy, right? Once you drop this, you can go crazy, right? The proof I'm not going to do because not very interesting anyway. So before the break, I want to tell you all the example that you will use when you actually write your model, right? Because you're not theorists, you are not expected to write a complicated model, right? At least at the first round. So how you start with production, right? Because we're abstract thing. So you will see even in a lot of theory paper, if you have complex environment, you start with this example, special cases, okay? And for example, you look at, say, the production is linear, right? So it's like this one, right? This isoquant is a linear one, okay? And you will derive your model based on this, okay? And of course, this implies the MRTS is a constant, right? Because you can always reduce one and increase one at the same proportion, right? So this is linear. We have seen this in the consumer, that is perfect substitute. Sorry, right? And also you expect perfect complement case here, but this is called Leontief, right? It's fixed proportion, right? Say this is also not too crazy, right? Suppose I want to have someone to produce research, right? Or research assistant, right? I hire a guy and a computer, right? It's a fixed proportion, right? I can't have someone who produce research without a computer, and without a guy I cannot produce, right? One labor and one capital, right? This is very natural, right? At least in the modern world, right? Of course, probably now we have AI, so probably one guy can do many things, right? If you endow him with an AI, but let's assume there's no AI, right? So in that case, this is also a good thing, okay? And Leontief or the fixed proportion is not too bad. That's happened, right? A lot of cases like you need fixed proportion, right? Right? There's always a bottleneck, right? Suppose I'm running a regression, you give me a normal data, right? Probably it's okay, but you give me a better version of data doesn't actually increase a lot, right? Because the bottleneck is not the computer, right? It's how fast I can think, right? How fast I can model, right? You give me a supercomputer, doesn't increase my research, right? You give me a crappy computer maybe, but you give me a good enough computer, you give me a very powerful computer, doesn't change a lot, right? So this, I think, fit very well. Okay? You can do this in your model. It's not something too terrible thing. Okay? It's based on the minimum of all this. Okay. And sometimes this is I guess it's most famous one if you learn macro, because this fit very well for the US GDP, capital labor. But this also, the math is also very nice, okay? Because the MRTS depends on, the technology also depends on how much you are using, okay? So that is the very nice one, the nice shape. This is again, this is the thing, if you learn intermediate micro, this is a leading example there, right? You always illustrate from this example. And on top about this, okay, elastic substitution. This also you have seen in the first set of slide, consumption. Consumption, the same thing. We have the substitution is MRS over the ratio. I mean, just if you forget about this, we have that in the first set of slide. Looks very crazy, this equation, but just to make sure that you are not really scared by the expression. So we have that here. So you can see the very similar thing, right? So, but the MR the same thing here, right? But I take an inverse, right? It's MRS, but MRTS over this. We have this already. So I use the inverse here. You ask me why I use this, because this appears in the Jathiran and Rennie textbook. So I just follow that notation. But for the consumer, I write my own slide, so that's why it's not you don't find this in the Jathiran and Rennie, so that's why I use my own notation. But here is in his textbook, so that's why I have that. But here you remember this R is the ratio. Basically, just look at the isoquant, right? Basically, it's like this. Let me draw a picture to make sure that you know the elasticity substitution, right? So suppose I have two input, right? And I have isoquant, right? This Q. Sorry, my input is X, right? Sorry for my bad notation. So I've been using the notation. This is X1, this is X2, right? And the isoquant is I fix a certain level output here, right? And now I pick a particular point here, say this point, okay? And I collect it from 0, okay? And if you learn math, right? So this is X2. Let's call this slope, I don't know, R, okay? It's R X2, right? X1, right? Just because intercept is 0, right? And at this point, you can calculate the isoquant, right? The slope of the isoquant, right, is, I don't know what color is it. You use this one, right? Sorry, I mean, it meant to be close to that line, okay? Close to the point. But this slope, right, is the MRTS, right? Negative MRTS, right? Is it 5? Look, doesn't look MRTS, right? Is if you take away 1 unit of I and how much, take away unit 1, how much 2, you need to make sure you're there, right? So the elasticity of substitution means the following, right? So if I rotate the line, so suppose I slightly rotate my line, okay, change R a little bit, right? Become R prime, say. Now I rotate a little bit, then you become X2 R prime X1, right? Rotate a bit, right? And I move a little bit another line, right? And I have another, I draw an isoquant, I have a new other MRTS, right? So the question is, I change a little bit out, and how this MRTS changes. That is a elasticity of substitution. Okay, I change this by 1%, and how much percentage MRTS changes. Okay, and that would be, I mean, we have that in the consumer, right? Already there. It's nothing new there, but now I have the isoquant, but there's nothing new. So don't worry about that. We have covered that already, right? But just I give you the graphical meaning. But this, right? You change this and you're over. But I think the book define is -1, but it doesn't really matter anyway, right? Because you just swap one way or the other, right? Either you change your MRTS, how you change the slope, but same as, right? Because it's continuous. So Doesn't really matter where I look at it. Okay. Want to talk at this because same as what we covered in the last class, this is the most famous, I guess, still widely used in the current literature, and how to you model a firm. The production technology is still, I think, is mostly common is the CES. You have many input. You combine this way, okay, and this is very standard way to do it. Right? It's additive separable, and right, adding raised to the power each input and multiply by some factor and raised to the power 1 over sigma. Okay, and I mean, if you look at the literature, I mean, still people use it. Okay, so it's not something old thing. I mean, still very recent, still living. And you have this, the elasticity substitution by this guy. We have proof about that, right? At the end, but I'm not going to do any proof. But what I want to mention is same as consumer. Okay, this is very general because it includes all the 3 special cases we discussed, right? So it's either a linear production, Leonti for Top Douglas is included in that CES, right? So that's why CES is so convenient and so easy to produce. Of course, you may ask, is this sufficient? Is it just a toy model? Do we need to take this to actual production, right? Because economists sometimes it's just you do this, right? And there are some extension to this as well, okay? But it will be based on this, more or less similar to this one. You have some extension to that. I think our former president of CHK, Park Wei Liu, professor, and he basically do this kind of stuff. I think it's I forgot the name of the production, but I mean he did extend this to a way much more general than this one, but it's along this line. So adding more high order terms here. I forgot what he did, but that is something can be extended. Okay. So now we're done with all the technology, and then you can see that's not too much different from consumer, right? So, but you do notice when we reach here, what assumption we make so far, right? To reach here, right? We assume continuity, right? Monotonicity, strictly quasi-concave, decreasing return to scale. And then last one, we make, to get this one, we make assumption of constant elasticity substitution, right? Which means that if you rotate a little bit, right? And the MLTS just fix, right? You rotate, remember this, right? Just to remind you, it's just the graph here, right? You rotate this a little bit, and the isoquant also rotate, right? And you rotate the same speed, okay? And you assume that, then we get a very nice result that end up into the one we have just seen here, right? So this is how you arrive here. And this is the one you use in your empirical studies, right? Right? Because even if you don't like this one, use the more simpler one, right? You use the one that we mentioned here, you're also subject to the same, right? But here, if you want this thing, you just basically assume this thing is going to happen, right? Just asking yourself, okay, if you are happy with this assumption, right, then it's even simpler. But that's how you make assumption, right? Because this class is to make sure that when you do empirics or do theory, you know what you are making assumption on, right? Because none of you, I guess 99% of you are not going to do theory, right? So you're not going to work on this, but you have to use some of the result here, but you understand what is assumption behind. I guess that's the most important point of this class, right? Of course, as also you would write some toy model as well, but the toy model in your using, you will be using this kind of special cases, right? I'm not thinking you would do CES in your theory, theory toy model, but your empirical use more complicated thing, but in your theory toy, then you are going to work on those. Okay. So I guess it's time to have a break. Let's have 15 minutes break. In the meantime, may I ask you to, do you reply? It is because airdrop is over. This count as the way to know whether you are in the class, right? But as remind you, there's no, I don't think we have a participation point, right? But just make sure you're there. Just fill in something to make sure that you are not absent, right? We know that there's no one is getting COVID, right? Because this day I still receive emails saying they get COVID. Then they want to exempt from the class. Okay, so if you don't have COVID, then probably you should fill in. So let's resume 15 minutes later. So it will be 10:40. You see you around. So let's have fun. So let's get resume and see how your reply going. Is it I'm going too fast or too slow? Difference connection between the elasticity substitution and CES. Okay. So the first question is there. So CES, it's just saying that the elasticity of substitution is constant no matter where you are there. Okay. So the proof is, I mean, just like this. It's just like, look at this, it's always a constant. Okay. If you have, means that if you rotate H point, you rotate a little bit, the isoquant is always moving at a constant speed. Okay, that is what it said. But it can be, if you draw a random production function can be not so smooth, right? Can be depend on where you are, can be very different shape, right? So CS is just saying that it's always a constant, right? It doesn't rely on where you are, right? So it just simply mean you move the isoquant is moving smoothly in some sense, right? And the standard thing you see is always a constant, right? If you have different shape, then it will be very different. Does it make sense to you? I mean, it's a moving in a very smooth in that idea. I hope they answer your question. Hopefully answer your question. You just say when it's a constant, then it's like then it will be CES. That is what it says. Okay. Is that clear? Just in case you're not, just go back to this one again, right? You rotate this a little bit, and the change, right? You say move it by 1%, and this rotate will also by the same fraction. No matter if you do it again, then the change is also the constant. It's moving at this constant speed. You rotate and the slope changing constant speed. That's what it said. Okay. And no matter you're picking this point, you rotate, the same thing. Is that clear? And it's always constant. Okay. And of course, if you think about where real thing, then it will be not constant, right? Because CS only include the thing you have seen in a standard way, right? Suppose we have, I think the slide, right? So this is the free leading example there, right? So you can imagine if I have some, say, add some more terms here, for example, right? Linear or combination, then you will not follow this shape. So as long as you can make some thing, then you will not follow this. ECD is not follow. I mean, only if a certain thing you will follow, right? So it's not something like it's very easy to violate. You can make up a function, then you can violate that. Okay. What does that mean? Sorry, I don't have a good. Oh, I think it's some of our. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I see. I was thinking this is it's not a question. Okay. Okay. I see. But is that okay for the meaning? I mean, I don't know who asked, but hopefully I explain that it's okay. Yeah. Okay, CS, MRTS, yes, exactly. Good. I think it's not too fast, and I mean, someone is not very happy my speed, but oh yeah, I guess most people are going to be happy if the God reduce the input of sunshine today. Is it? Is it too hot? Yeah, maybe. I guess most people are happy if the God is going to increase our typhoon signal from 1 to 10, and another 0 there, maybe people is very happy. Irrational choice is when you receive education of utility maximizing and still crying in econ job market. But what does that mean? Is it something? I understand every single word, but when it combines something I don't understand, maybe there's some way the combination. I guess I try to get what it means is education is maximizing your utility. But I think what it meant is I guess you try to say you are getting the PhD degree, it's very happy, but your market is very crowded. Yeah, I get pretty much. I mean, I guess probably the worst news is I think now is the worst time to get a PhD in some sense, right? Because at least in China, right? Because in China it's like there's so many PhD program, right? I mean, in one school alone you have like more than 10,000 doctoral candidate, right? Is studying, right? I mean, for example, in Zhejiang, right? I mean, probably know the news, right? The current PhD student, the total number is more than what they have been produced in the past in total, right? So I think it's a waste of time, right? But also it's best of time as well, because now if you don't do PhD, the skills you have is going to be replaced by AI anyway, right? So if you don't get PhD properly, you get no job. So your PhD, you still have some job. So better to be employed than unemployed. So it's okay. But the poor thing is like the premium of PhD probably is going to be zero because everyone is good. But at least you get some salary, right? But I would say, I mean, it's not that bad. At least I would predict, at least you still got the PhD premium for the upcoming 10 to 20 years. But I don't know after you're 35 years old what happened. Okay, I not a macroeconomist, but from a microeconomic perspective, I think at least for the upcoming 10 to 20 years is still fine. But after 10 years later, probably we all go unemployed, right? But of course, in that case, we all got money without working. So in some sense, not that bad, right? We get some basic salary in that sense, right? But anyway. Whatever. So we'll go to the cost function, okay? And then we'll do the most important part is the give you the all the equilibrium, or the optimization result. So we start with the case where firms are price taker, okay? And probably if you learn macro, turn out to be this is now the thing they actually works on is firms are no longer a price taker in the factor market. I mean, it's well known in the IO industrial organization literature, firms are not price taker in the product market, which is well studied. I mean, since 60s, right? But now recent 10 years, 5 to 10 years, in the economic literature, now people also drop this assumption where firm is no longer a price taker in the factor market. Indeed, they are so powerful, it become more or less monopoly, right? I mean, in my recent paper, I also study this kind of problem, and then we cite a fact that also mentioned in the previous few cases is like, if you look at the labor market, actually firm has a huge monopoly power in the sense that for a job, it's very narrowly defined job. You usually have the average employer you have is 2.6. So you have a narrow down, say, for example, you are doing information system and look at economics of information system, then probably in the world only 2 people hiring, right? Or you look at accounting, you look at study, say, for example, audit market, then probably only 2 schools hiring you when you go to job market, right? Or you look at microeconomics, you study game theory, probably in the world, even in the world, maybe only a few schools hiring, right? Or already we are the academic, right? We're facing global market already. We have the largest labor market we can imagine, right? Because usually you only can look for a job in your neighborhood, right? Geographically, right? But we are looking at the global job already. In that case, it's very narrow these days. So that's why this is something that is very important to make things work. But now we know that, this is under a lot of research about how firm behave when the firm is not price taking in the factor market. And this is very important. And those who are looking at supply chain is also a big issue there, right? Because we know Walmart or Apple is a very strong negotiator in their determine the price of the inputs. But anyway, let's assume this price taker, there's a price is going to be W up to Wn, okay? It's positive, okay? It's very positive. Otherwise, if equal to 0, then you buy maximum of that factor, okay? And so this is a problem. The first problem is the firm is going to minimize expenditure such that the production is more than certain level. And this is exactly the same as consumer. Remember, consumer is also minimizing expenditure such that his utility target is more than certain level. And so this is exactly the same problem. So by math, it's no difference, right? So that's why we said there's no difference from what we have seen. So this is very trivial question, and we know all the property there, right? So this is, we have a nice solution under the assumption we have on F, okay? And if you recall, you solve the Lagrangian, right? Which is the price, if you remember the outcome in the first lecture, right? Or last lecture, right? Is the price is equal to the lambda is the Lagrangian multiplier, and this marginal utility, right? The same here. But now it's input price, and this is the marginal production function with the marginal product, right? Before the marginal utility and price of output. Now the price of input and marginal product, the same thing, right? And because this is the same as this guy, right? And this must be binding. So you change the inequality become equality, right? So basically, the first thing you do just to remind yourself is, first is to prove the Rabas law equivalent. This have to put equal, and this is Lagrangian problem, and you can easily solve the standard skill in the calculus, right? But this equation, we have already known how to interpret that already, right? So remember how we interpret that is use MRS equal to the price ratio. So we can do the same, is MRTS equal to the price ratio, right? Before is, but we said that is the internal exchange rate, same as the external exchange rate, right? Because in the market, you can buy and sell your factor according to this ratio, right? If you sell 1 unit of, or you use less input I, you save WI money, right? And how many unit J you can buy is 1 divided by that, right? So you use less 1 unit. So this is the exchange ratio in the outside market, right? That's how you can substitute financially, right? Or mathematically. And this is the substitution in technology sense, right? Or what we call internal, right? This is outside market, this is within firm, how this exchange ratio looks like, right? You keep the production the same, how this is being done, and it should be the same, right? And you can use the other 2 and 3. I think this is very intuitive as well. This is saying that if I give you $1 more, okay, or I take away $1 more from you, then you have to reduce input I by 1/WI, right? Because it's how much $1 can buy you for input I, right? And if I take away $1 from you, you buy 1/WI unit less, right? And that means that you produce this much less, right? It's output reduction, right? I take away $1 from you, and you have to reduce the production through the input I, and that is how much your output reduction from the I perspective. But this from J perspective, right? And it must be the same, right? Otherwise, if you can do the other way around, then we figure out that to do it efficiently from one side or the other, right? So that means that I give you $1 more or take away $1 more, right? No matter which one you are going to do, the same, right? So it doesn't really matter whether I take away $1 more, you take away from I or take away from J, the effect is the same. Okay. And you can swap this thing up and down, right? With the same idea, right? But the English interpretation is different, right? Here is, okay, if I want to produce 1 more unit of output, okay, I can do it through increasing through the input I or input J, right? If I want to produce 1 more unit output, okay, how many unit of I need, right? It's 1 over this guy. And this is the cost of doing so. Okay, let me repeat, is if I increase production of 1 unit of output, how many I need is 1 over Fi, right? And the cost of this unit of how many unit of I times Wi is the cost of increasing 1 unit output through 1 unit output through the input I. Okay, and this will be same across inputs. Okay, and this equal to the multiplier, right? And the multiplier, if you remember the M.Phil theorem, the multiplier is this guy, right? So you just d this cost over y, right? So basically, it's I increase 1 more unit output, how much cost is increasing, right? So this is the M.Phil theorem tells us. So this is same as what we have said, right? So it's how much you need to pay, right? If you increase 1 more unit output at optimal, right? So lambda, and you can see lambda if your construction is marginal cost, right? It's marginal cost. But anyway, the same idea as we have in the consumer case. If you assume steady concavity and there will be unique problem, unique solution, because if you have 2 optimal level, then the middle is better, right? So you only have 1, right? Because steady concave means that you combine the 2, right? It's better off. So if you have 2 solution, it can't be, right? Because the middle one is better. So it violates the idea. And that means that we have only 1 solution, right? Instead, there's no multiple solution. It's a unique, okay? And unique, you can say function, right? Otherwise, there's no function, right? It's a correspondence. So it must be a function. That remind you function is you give me 1 thing, I give you 1 thing, not give you 2 things, okay? So when your function, then I have what we call the conditional input demand. And conditional here means that I have to give you the y. Okay? Y is, you have to tell me what is your output target. I will tell you what is the input I need, right? So it's conditional on, I tell you y. It will be for every y, we have this, okay? So it's conditional. But later we will take out the y, we determine optimal y, so that become input demand. So conditional implement, I have to tell the y, okay? But this is nothing but just same as the hex key demand, right? Hex key demand is price, right? And you give me your utility level, Hexian demand, if you can't recall. The Hexian demand is like this as well. The cost management problem is Hexian demand, right? But same thing. So that's why I said we are faster here, because you learn it, but in a different way. We just rephrase everything in a different way. Okay, so you should draw similarity between the 2. If you can't see it, they're same, then you don't understand. They're the same thing, because you make the same assumption, same structure, everything is same. So if you can't see it, then you have to read the 2 set of slides the same, it's the same thing. Okay, just rephrase everything the same thing, same math, right? The idea is the same, right? We fix the isoquant, and we move our budget, right? Because this constant line is the budget that the expenditure, right? So you just keep moving around until you hit the point that hit it, and then it must be tangent, right? That explains why the tangency condition will be satisfied under the FOC, right? The marginal rate of technical substitution must be equal to the price ratio, right? The input price ratio, the constant slope there. So just move up and down until you hit it. So I know this is too easy. So, and nothing very deep here, just like if you double your input price ratio, then nothing changes at all, right? Because same as the Hexian demand, right? You change the price rate, the input price ratio doesn't change, right? So just everything double, right? FOC doesn't change at all, right? Because FOC, remember, is input price ratio. equal to MRTS, right? You double everything there, nothing changes. Your internal doesn't change, right? That's an external change, so nothing changes. So if you look at this in the macro idea, right, it does means that inflation has no change in the plan for the firm, right? Of course, macro people would disagree, but look at the micro idea, right? Just like everything double doesn't change your result, right? And here there's some idea want to say is we see that some people call inferior input or normal input, okay? And what it meant is if you increase your output, okay, whether your input I is going to increase or reduce, and it need not be monotonic, okay, it can be not so, okay, it can be increased, it can decrease, it depends on your technology there, okay. It can be for example, you can imagine I do some calculation. A calculator, right, initially is normal input, right? I mean, I use my hand to calculate very slow, but you give me a computer, right? So you give a calculator, in the beginning it's very good, right? But once I have more calculator, actually doesn't really help me a lot, right? Because my hand is fixed, or computer power, right? That is not going to be very useful. Then I will substitute using my computer, right? Usually I use calculator, but when you ask me to produce more and more and more efficient to use computer, right? Because initially computer is very expensive, right? You ask me to do some simple calculation, the optimal thing to do is calculator, right? Just type it, right? And once the production is getting larger and larger, I would use computer, right? That's I have decreasing. So initially it's normal input, but later is inferior. So it can really depends. It need not be same, right? It need not be a input is always normal, is always inferior. It depends on where. Same as a consumer, right? When you are hungry, right? When you have no money, then you probably eat more rice, right? And up to a certain point, probably you don't eat more rice. You need fish, you need meat, you need something else, right? So it's the normal and inferior can be depends on the technology you have, okay? So this example that Cobb-Douglas that derived to tell you how can you from this to the end, right? And as I said, the red thing is something I expect you to know how to do it, and you will see it in the assignment later. Okay, so I guess just let me take 1 second. Hello. Just because I worry about delivery to my office because I ordered something, but anyway, so this is the result. Actually, we have seen is what we call the cost function. We always assume when we write the model, okay, is if we took the prices and output, right? That is the optimal result, right? Because we often assume that happened because you give me an output, you give me the prices, I tell you how much it costs, and usually we would assume our model start from here, right? Because usually we don't start from technology. Usually you start from cost function, right? Either you from econometric standpoint or you write the model, usually you don't start from this guy. You start from this guy directly, okay? And the reason why we want to study this is show you that when you make the assumption on this guy, actually you're making an assumption on this guy, right? So it's better to make an assumption on this guy rather than this guy, right? So that is the reason. And there's nothing but this is just what? Exponential function. If you remember our consumer, just to go back in case you forget, this is just our exponential function, this guy. So you have to see that parallel. There's nothing new there, right? Because the firm is also choosing input to maximize its output in the single output case, right? Same as, and now we just consider a simple case. It's like he minimizes expenditure based on his utility target, right? The same problem here. So that's why we start from this easier problem, because we know how the consumer behave, right? So that's why I don't talk about maximizing revenue, right? Because we know how to do it. Okay, and we learn how to redo it. We just put in there, right? Just put in the there, and then they're related in that sense, right? Just you know how to find the Hicksian demand, right? And then multiply by that is the cost function. So this related as well. There's nothing new there, but so now I guess it's important to talk about property, right? Because this is what we assume in our application. We don't actually go from the technology, but we assume this directly. So I want to show you this. They have this property. Why? Because that will be important for econometrics, or right? You want to test our hypothesis. This will be there, or you have to show that when you to make any assumption on the production cost function, you have to follow this. Okay. So the first one is trivial, right? Output 0, cost is 0. Second one should be increase in price and output. That is also normal. And it's increasing in Y, right? Is you produce more, you need more, you need to pay more. There's nothing deep. And the fourth one is input prices also increasing. There's nothing deep there as well, right? More expensive, then cost more. Okay. I think the key is 5, 6, and 7. That is something important. And 5 is just saying that if you double the prices, your cost also double, right? So just make sure that you is in your cost function. And this is concave input prices. What does that mean here? It will mean, doesn't have that the feature. They improve it, right? Means if you have two situations, okay, and you combine them, right, and that thing will be more expensive, okay? But probably you can forget about the technical thing. But the more important thing, I think, is this guy, okay? If you're able to estimate the cost function, okay, which is probably you're able to look at from the data. Once you guess that, you take a derivative, you get the input demand. Why is it good? Two things. One is I have the cost function estimated. I can know their demand, right? Even though if I can't observe what the input is, as long as I can estimate the cost function, right, which may be possible, right, from the historical data, okay, and I can estimate this input demand without looking at how much input they use, right? Because maybe I look at financial data, I only have input number for several input, but not some input I can't observe, right? But by indirectly estimating this guy, which may be possible from financial balance, financial statement, right? Then I can back out the thing I don't know, right? Or the other way around, if I know what the inputs, okay, at different price level, I can back out the cost function, right? And why I want to look at the cost function, because once I guess the cost function of your opponent or your upstream firm, downstream firm, I can do maximization, right? So you know how to negotiate, right? Because you may not know your competitor or your supplier's cost function, right? Because if you want to guess them, then this is the way to do it. Okay, so this is I think this is a very important in econometric aspect, right? Because this is right. I hope this is clear what I say. Suppose, right? Maybe you can estimate this, right? Alpha, and because you want to know alpha 1 and alpha 2, you don't know your opponent, right? Or your firm you want to study, right? But you can observe these input prices, right? And by looking at the cost, right? At certain output, which is you can look at the firm's output, right? And look at the total cost, you can see the cost of production, right? You can back out the alphas, right? Assuming firm is doing optimal thing. So you can estimate these alphas, right? Once you know the production technology, you can do weird stuff, right? Because the firm wouldn't tell you this guy, right? But you can imagine firm is doing optimal production, right? Right? They're minimizing costs, right? Even though that, remember, we don't assume the firm is doing profit maximizing, right? You just assume he's minimizing his cost, which is very minimal assumption, right? I don't think firm would want to waste money, right? Regardless of he want to maximize market share, whatever, right? It's very minimal assumption. As long as we assume the firm is not stupid, right? He don't want to waste money. This is always whole, right? So you can always back out from his cost, you can back out his production function, right? So that's how you estimate the technology, right? It's one way, right? Because you can know their cost by looking at look at his income statement, right? You can look at these prices because price taker look at how much it costs in the market, the labor, the wages, and so on and so forth, right? You can output you can observe as well. So this is how you can do that, right? Even though you don't know how much the firm is using the input, right? Of course, if I know his input, I'm done. I don't need to do this crazy thing, right? But in the many cases, you don't know the inputs. Is that clear? So you can back out from the market price, price test data and output data, back out the production function. So just simple thing, you've seen this average cost function and marginal cost function, right? We already assume all the time. Now quickly, long run and short run, right? And in the principal classes, you say, okay, long run and short run, and it's very hard to define, right? Because you say, oh, short run is something in the short, long run something long, but what does that mean, right? I mean, in the principal class, they don't tell you what long run and short run. Short run says, okay, I look at today, and then the short run. Long run is something I look at very long run, right? But maybe more than a year. But what is long run? Short run maybe days, maybe a week, right? And long run maybe years, but that's not the accurate description. Short and long run is just planning horizon. It simply means that what they're thinking, are all the factor of input we can change or not. For example, if we think about a firm with a rental contract, if we're thinking about we can ignore the rental contract, right? And we're thinking about beyond the rental contract, right? Because maybe we rent this place for 3 years. Think about beyond 3 years, right? We can dispose of this rental contract, right? You see, in the choice of whether we renew this rental contract or not, if we allow everything to be our choice, everything's on the table, it's long run, right? Long run means everything you can change. Okay? If something is not changeable, we keep it as constant. Say suppose we are renting this place, we're thinking about how to optimize the operation daily or weekly, right? Even monthly, even yearly. As long as there's something keep there, you can't change, then it's still short run. Okay, it's basically pen horizon, right? If you think beyond certain thing, right, everything can be done, it's long run. So that is what it means. Okay. And for short run, just mean that some factor remain unchanged. Okay, but it is very simple because it doesn't affect our choice, right? So just optimization, the same thing. Or actually, up to this point, you should ask yourself if you ever study microeconomics in your undergrad. Why we don't have short run and long run for consumer? do we? Why, ask yourself, why we have never mentioned that?
Consumers do not have such the factor like this, they can change.
Well, actually, you do. Maybe this. Okay, look. Actually, you still often see this in the TV dramas. Okay, a man and woman. Okay, in the old days, right? Maybe men abuse the woman, but now probably reverse. The woman abuse the man, right? Anyway, whatever. And suppose the old days, right? I mean, old days. The men keep abusing the woman, and the movie will do the woman cry, right? And cry and talking to her friend, and just very unhappy and eat a lot, and or maybe shopping a lot, right? Very unhappy, right? And this solution are short-run solution. Why? Because she's not thinking about divorce, right? But if divorce is on the table, that's long run, because everything can change, right? Or people think about this case is like, okay, often the woman said, okay, that guy is bad, okay, but I will divorce him once the kid goes up, right? That's a long run, right? Actually, we have that, but we never talk about this. The consumer do a long run, short run thing, okay. But of course, we didn't talk about that. But you do think this is because you can see the similarity here. The firm has long run, short run. Actually, consumers also have long run. In the short run, maybe you keep consuming the same thing, but in the long run, okay, you change your behavior, right? Everything is off, okay? In the long run, there will be some behavior there, okay? And if you don't understand this, it's because we talk about short and long run is to understand the firm behavior in the short run, right? Because you will see why some firm has very little business, is still operating, right? Why, right? Why you see some firm, right, is still operating maybe only 1 or 2 customers, they still open the shop. Why is the case? Or you see many restaurants only have business for the dinner, right? Maybe lunch they don't, or have a little, they don't, right? Why they still open, right? Or why some restaurant they close in the afternoon, right? I mean, you see some restaurant, right? They close afternoon, and the staff are playing mahjong or watching their phone. Why is the case, right? Because it's a short run, long run idea, right? Because there's something is fixed, right? Because the rent is fixed, right? So even though the lunch is losing money, is still recovering some money, they still do it, right? And why they close in the afternoon in many places in China, right? Because they make the money. That's basically that's why they shut down that thing, right? They save money from the power and all the other thing, right? But in Hong Kong, right, many stores open in the afternoon for the tea, right? It's very cheap, right? They basically don't make a lot of money, right? But at least the money they earn doesn't cover the rent, right? But at least they can cover the marginal cost. Actually, we'll talk about that, right? Because when you optimize, you forget about this, right? As long as the money you make can cover this part, you do it. Okay, but we'll talk about that very soon when we talk about profit maximization. Okay, but here is a short run cost problem, and there's something similar. I'm not going to talk about that. There's one more. There's a math property you learn. This one. Let me draw a picture on that. So you learned in the principal class, so there's a cost function. This is say this is output, y. This is money, right? And very often you will see this graph. This is AC, average cost. And you learn from undergrad loads like the marginal cost like this. This is the usual graph you see in principal class, right? And why this cut in the bottom? If you still remember. And there's a math proof to that I have there. But this can be proven by math. But the idea is like this, right? At this point, increase 1 unit of output would cost you this much. And the average cost is also this much, right? But when the extra unit is more expensive, right? And you go up as well. And this go up slower than this guy, right? Because average and then add the certain unit. So it must be in this case. Okay, but if you want to learn the math, it is the reason is the behind the math, but I'm not going to show you just very one line of math there. I'm not going to talk about those. Okay. And that's what I said, right? This is the case, and you can prove this guy. Okay. Okay. So I guess I cover the first part of the firm, which is cost minimizing. I want to remind you one thing is cost minimizing is the very simple thing, doesn't require on the firm objective at all. It's just simply technological constraint, and firm is optimizing on the technology. Okay, there's nothing about the firm's behavior except the firm is not stupid. It's not wasting money. Okay, as long as it's not wasting money, that is what we have. Okay, so even if you say, okay, I think the firm is doing strategic thing, the firm is doing some crazy stuff, as long as the firm is facing a market that he can't control the price, he faces a price that's a given, this is what you have. There's nothing, there's no assumption behind except these two. Okay, it's not stupid. He can't control the price. That's what you get. Let's get a cost function. Okay, so there's minimal assumption there. But after the break, we talk about profit maximization. That will have a big assumption there. Okay, we assume the firm is maximizing profit. In that case, we need some assumption here. Okay, and don't worry, this is something actually even simpler than what we have, because this later after break we'll see this is a unconstrained optimization. That's even easier. Okay, even though the problem looks a lot more complicated, but in fact the firm is even doing something simpler than what we have seen. Okay, let's have a break of 15 minutes, and then after that we'll come back, and then I'm pretty sure we can finish everything by today. So we know how the firm behave facing the market, that he can't change the market price. That is very simple. But of course, you will complain. I mean, this is too easy, right? Because but later you will see we can get more complicated when we go to game theory. Okay. And I guess that should be it. But in the meantime, I mean, probably I can do another round of this one, but this one will be optional because if you do the first one, this second one you can just you don't have to do it. But just in case you haven't done anything, you can just do it. That's just 5 questions. That's a break. Let's resume a little bit earlier because I have 5 minutes. So let's resume 11:40. Exactly the same question. 收到了，大概的不是一样。这种这样的。It's very technical problem, so that we cannot consider the long-term or short-term behavior of the customer
first place. I think in the early science literature about the plastic flexible.
There's already going to be because it's supposed to be just saying that if you have to do something to change the flexible, right?
So there's no technical issues.
So technical issue.
For while we don't care for natural.
Or that's actually we have to downstream. Down there, that's from these. We saw from the farmers and too.
It's a short term.
Yeah, short run you have to buy it. You can't change it. The long run you can fix it to the long. You can go on how to do it. You can go to Vietnam to find the
Yeah, I think that's
right.
Well, yeah, it means that in generally the customers have fixing themselves.
Yeah, you have to. You don't sign a contract. Unless you sign a contract, you do rent, suppose rent a house, then you have a you try to do the contract. Usually you don't sign very long, but you do when you marry, you're supposed to. You get the relationship. And if you suppose you don't want to break up with your girlfriend, then if you didn't do the right thing, how you can punish yourself? How you can if you think about okay, that's fine, but the girlfriend and it's for everything.
Compared with
For
built on
yeah.
yeah,
Understand. Yeah. There's something a little bit understanding, but when you see the purposes of you know what I mean. Okay, consumer
if you consider the use from materials, work will also be
because evil.
so like LM treatment era, empowered by knowledge, maybe one individual and big can utilize the tool to engage in the production and it's impossible that every one of us is like either expose the individual and the
Well, yeah, that's what we do in the consulting general. There is a consumer, everyone is consumer at the same time. We do have our own yes. If you cook your own food, you are a consumer, you do something. You all cook your own food. You buy it all food. Right. Why, this is all. I tend to miss some song. No. I busy for如果我哋算低就買上手，一全買。OK，拜拜。也是冰箱的，加的。You're doing production. There's only yeah, just like the firm has a unit. If you do home production, you put room for safety. Right, so you want to make a noodle, right? You can combine meat and vegetable. Say, to make yourself active, or just combine different food. So, you want to do the same. Make sure you make your own food. Make sure it's happiness, satisfied by combining that work food. Both sides. Still the same. Still the same. Don't think so. Even AI is doing the same thing. You don't get research. This time, they go about tools with AI. Can buy stuff. Okay. The new algorithm can you But there's a protocol that allow AI to initial purchasing. Even AI will have to follow this. This is the optimal you have seen even AI will follow this. Actually, it's not all the everything is not very because management usually don't follow this vertical and not as actually it's even more better. It's more better. Oh, but they can calculate everything very nicely. Because for you to optimize over this population map, but you are also rational. But computer can optimize very nicely. Actually, it's good. Actually, it's more better. Even more better. Yes. So because they allow AI agent. Program. So the game you can buy yeah, yes. Game is by super smart people. Human are not super smart. Sometimes they're so down. Computer never always suggest they got AI so it's like more better. We want AI actually follow. Yeah. Surprising, right? We actually say our life is actually more better. Yeah. Makes the theory like the it's often AI follow. Often about doing yeah, AI will learn to take AI will produce this result of this. So input one input two, not out of say more almost what you do. It's a prediction of the future. Yeah, it's very simple. Yeah, because even if the case not identified by AI, then will be advised by AI when to do something. AI okay, I already do. At least this always do you follow. Yeah, so AI can do it so many people have to do this. Yeah, suppose you go provide you the suppose I want to go to tennis on the bar then and once I click they provide this is the super and just provide you with something use your search cost. Yeah. Also, president when I want to buy these these dishes, I tell you buy from here, they come on. It's easier as the short end. The technology is not the software around the post marketing industry. Generally on around town. And some patterns. All you. Therefore, what we start. Reality that about the assumption. Yes. It's a kind of cue the behavior on the journey. At the end of the day, it will become so. You calculate the super calculator. It's a calculator. How can you have a calculator? I'm also not now. Your IQ keep cost. So that we can. Yeah, some advice. I see you some more better. We studied lessons. Because people will fall out, so you don't swim to the person. Everyone decision follow AI, so what is this AI equivalent? So yeah, that's what that was yeah, maybe because of how AI are behaving, the importance of AI, importance of doing yes. Okay, I know about the trade. It's okay. This is bad. Happen, right? Yeah, you are love. Well, now they create resources, right? Create something new, do also. And look at what's in there from that.技术可能会让一些经理人说这次比赛变得更加的比如说就比如说只有我假设别人的是不然不是在现在最便宜，还有分这个东西有的为了这个主要是一些技术比较好使的这个问题，比如说是吧？部分有一些帮助，但是他们没做能够的，我们消费者也是在呈现的。但是他的让有压力，包括像做翻译的时候，双方提供就是他学会了人使用的这个规则，但是他不学。我觉得这个东西有就可能产生人的这种少一把要带小的机器人，就是到这个时候我这个也有好多。
I guess resume. No one leaving the message, so I think we're good. Oh, just a quick thing that I figure out I think about that in the break is about long run and short run. Indeed, actually you see all this often on consumer in a lot of TikTok video or video online, right? It's that we always said 格局小了 is actually what you mean, right? When the short run is 格局小了，对吧？ That's actually what you mean, right? Because you didn't think out of the box. Because that is what it means, right? We didn't think out of the box. We keep things, something is fixed, right? And what Elon Musk said, right? The first principle, you think about what actually is driving things there. So it's a long run idea. But anyway, we do have that, but we didn't talk about short run and long run. But it's about the idea about your thinking and in consumption, right? So profit maximization, which I guess is now we eventually go to the actual firm or the firm doing. The idea is very simple. Right? We just firm is maximizing its profit. Profit comes from this, remember this input prices your input. Okay, this is the cost of production. And P times Y is, P is the price of your output, right? So P times Y will be the revenue. Revenue minus cost is profit. So the firm is maximizing profit by choosing how many input it use, how many output is going to be done, subject to how much you produce, right? Is subject to the technology constraint, right? This technology constraint, right? How much you can produce based on input. Okay. So this problem seems to be complicated, but the fact that you don't throw away your output, F is monotonic, means this we call it equality, right? Because of equality, you can replace Y by this, right? So that's become a very simple problem because this is the simple maximization problem without any constraint. So this is the first class in calculus, right? There's nothing deep here, right? I want to remind you that P is a constant, okay? So how much the firm will produce doesn't affecting the P. So that's very important, okay? But this problem is easy to solve because just simple problem, and then you can use calculus that Newton has been using, right? It's a 400 years old solution, right? You just, the result with this one, but go back to the assumption here, right? Without using the math, look at this question, right? You would just, what we say is you change your input, right? Change the many input, but change input such that, right? You increase the input of I, that would increase your revenue by P times the marginal product, right? So that is called the marginal product revenue. And you increase 1 unit of I will cost you WI, right? So that's why you see this is marginal revenue equal to marginal cost, right? Because you use 1 more unit of I, it costs you WI. This is a cost. And what's the good thing about this is you can always sell your product at price P because it's price sticking. So that's why you increase 1 more unit of I input. This is the output you can produce times P is the benefit of that, right? So that is the standard thing in economics, right? It's a marginal revolution. People talk about everything is marginal, right? At the end of the day, right? So it's to compare at the edge, you do everything is compare marginal benefit over marginal cost. So this formula actually imply more than firm. It's actually applied to every single thing. That's actually how economists colonize every single area in social science. Because you assume humans are not stupid. At the end of the day, whatever action is going to take, right, it's going to be like this, right? Because human, what doing is instead of this, right? Whatever you do, right, is benefit minus cost. And you would change your action, right? As long as you satisfy this kind of thing, right? And the constraint is reflected in this one, right? So that means that benefit is equal to marginal benefit equal marginal cost. That's how economists do whatever thing there, right? Say, for example, X is how many kids you have, right? For example, for a family, right? You decide how many kids you have is compare marginal benefit equal to marginal cost, right? Marginal cost will be how much money you spend on raising the kid, right? Benefit may be 10 years later, the 20 years later, the kid will pay your retirement benefit, right? 养儿防老, right? This is what happens, right? So that's the same idea here, right? So you do whatever action there, the same as marginal benefit, marginal cost. So this is not just firm, right? This is applied to almost every single economics, and that's is this underlying framework of economics. Okay, so but we impose the firm. Okay, but you can see the trick here is you face a lot of constraint, right? But the constraint will be imposed by in this way, right? This is a benefit. So this go to here, then everything very nicely done. Oh yeah, yeah, fx, sorry. It's X. Sorry, typo, that things. Very good eyes. I don't know how I can miss that, but but you know what's going on, right? Yeah, sorry for that. It's X because this whole equality. Thanks for pointing this out. Okay. So this is the key, right? And in macroeconomics, that's very, very important because this is the factor price, right? This is wages or rental rate, right? Rental rate will be this interest rate, right? In the finance, right? And this is the marginal product, right? So that is how people look at this, right? Because if you want to look at innovation, look at the firm productivity analysis, right? And look at if the firm is facing the market, and look at the wages and see how the technology change the firm's production frontier, right? Because you can keep track of how the firm is paying their labor or the rental, the capital, and you will trace out how the technology changes, right? Suppose you have an old machine that sells $10 and the other machines, a new machine tells you $20, right? Right? Then the output doesn't change prices. Then you can see, you can imply that the new machine will be twice productive as the old machine, right? And of course, if the output price changes, you can also capture it in this way, right? So that's why by looking at the output price and input price, you can capture the production technology, okay? If the firm is price taking. So that is a very useful equation by itself, okay? Not just the simple marginal benefit or marginal cost, which is very general, applied to, as I said, almost every single model. If you take economics right now, I mean, if you don't have game theory, this is what you get. Okay, of course, game theory will change every single aspect of that, but as long as the game element is not there that much, right? You assume everyone is small in this system, then this is what you get, right? Also, Becker also win Nobel Prize by taking this into crime, right? Right, because why you commit a crime, why you steal stuff, right? And then look at marginal benefit cost, right? The cost will be punishment, how likely the policeman comes, right? The benefit is how things you can steal, right? So that also you can see there, okay? Because that is how family and the crime economics gets in. And this is the graphical representation, right? This is the marginal value of the marginal product, right? And the firm is facing a fixed wage because price taking. And the intercept will be the equilibrium. And this is the what we call the input demand, no longer conditional, right? Conditional demand is W and Y, but now it's P and W, input price and output price. Before it's input price and output target. Now this is just prices. Okay, this is the input demand, which I'll show in the next slide, right? This is the input demand because the solution to this one, right, will give you the X because this is P is exogenous, W is exogenous, right? So what these equations will show you this, you adjust X, right? Because remember the problem is you're choosing input and output, right? And once you replace this, only input price is the choice of your optimization, right? So you will solve this out like in this way. Of course, this is only one dimension, right? But you have many input, then you will make sure that every single thing will fit this one. Right? Do remind you that if you change this guy, the other will change because this potentially depends on other input as well. So you change this simultaneously, you have to fix all the system of equation, right? Because you should this good I, this is good J, right? You should change this and the other will change, right? So you would make sure that the whole system will solve it out. And if you write the alternative form of it in this one, this very simple price, right? Is you produce one more good, that's what you get. Okay, this marginal benefit of producing one more good. Okay, before it's marginal benefit of increasing one more unit of input, but now it's marginal benefit of producing one more good, that is P. what's the marginal cost of increasing one more good? Okay. It can be through input I. Okay. If you produce one more good by increasing input I, how many input I you need is 1 over the marginal product, right? And how much it costs to get this unit, multiply Wi. Let me repeat, seems to be a little bit tricky. Left-hand side is the benefit of having produced one more unit of output, right? P. You can always sell at Y, sell at P, right? And how to do that, what's the cost of doing so? You can do it by increasing in any unit of input, right? Can be 1 up to n, right? But it should be same because optimal, right? Optimal should be same. And you can do it through input I, okay? If you want to produce one more unit of output, how many I you need is 1 over this guy, right? 1 over this guy, right? Because you increase 1 I, you get this one. You reverse it, you get this guy, right? It's a ratio thing. And this 1 over this is how many units of I you need, and this multiplied by that is total cost, right, of doing so. Okay, so it should be the same. So you can see the marginal benefit and marginal cost always apply, depending on how you look at it, but it's always interesting to look at this because that's how you should write your paper, right? Because if you look at this, is at the end of the day, it should be marginal benefit and marginal cost, right? Unless the people are crazy, right? Or you have corner solution, right? But otherwise, in general, this is something you expect, you analyze, right? Because this is how things are being done. So if you do it this will be in the price dimension, in the Y, right? So you increase in Y, you always sell the same price, the marginal benefit. And the marginal cost is increasing, right? Because that come from the usual the concave production function, right? Then you will go up the marginal cost, right? Although WI may not change, but this is getting smaller and smaller, right? You keep increasing the input I, right? The marginal product is actually dropping, right? So that's why it goes up. And you cut somewhere. This is the output function, right? Depending on the prices, what output the firm is going to take. Is that okay? So this is output. And of course, this would also be true, okay? Because you look at two different I and J, right? Because they should equal to the price, right? So you should also get this equal to this guy, right? Just make sure you understand what I'm saying. You should WJ here. You should be also DF XJ. You can just just swap, right? Just swap, which input price ratio, margin, MRTS. Okay. So you will get the same equation there, which is not surprising because you're maximizing anyway. So it's a more complicated problem. You should also solve the same thing. Okay. So this is the very standard thing, right? We have seen in the consumer as well, right? If it's strictly concave, then this is a unique solution. So we assume that anyway. To remind you why strictly concave, come from decreasing return to scale, right? If you don't have that, then you don't have the solution. Okay. So you have a constant return to scale, then you don't have solution to that. Say suppose actually you can see if f is constant return to scale, the production is infinite. Either 0 or infinite. It can't be interior solution. So that's why you have to assume classical case, you have to assume decreasing return to scale in order to get your result right. Okay. So I combine the two things, right? So we have the input demand and output function. Okay, just X and Y. And it's the solution to this big problem. Okay. Is that okay? And of course, in solving this problem, we also solve the cost minimization problem at the end, right? You can solve this big problem, and as intermediate step or the side factor, you also solve the cost minimization problem, or you can do the cost minimization problem first. Okay. So there are some property here. I think is rather trivial. I just mentioned it. I think even without proof, going to be true, right? Suppose price is double. Okay, output price is double. Doesn't change your choice because doesn't appear in optimal condition, right? Nothing changes. Okay, and price is double, input price, output price double, nothing changes. And this second and the third is trivial, right? Output price goes up, you produce low less. Input price goes up, you use no more, right? Something truly nothing deep there. And this example that I'm not going over, but you will be doing something similar for your assignment is I give you the particular function. I need you to solve the problem, right? Figure out what is the input demand, okay? And what is the output function, okay? I'm not going line by line. I think it's at your level, PhD level, you should be able to do that, okay? For sure, if your question, ask the TA, or you will do it with assignment, you will see something similar, okay? You have to be able to do that. I mean, just to make sure this is just intermediate level, okay? It's undergraduate level, so I don't think I need to cover it, right? But if you really have a problem, just ask me. Okay, you put it back once you solve the X, you put back to the production, then you get the answer. Okay, not going to do in further detail. Okay, so finally, we come to the very last out thing is the profit function. Okay, and this is you just put back everything there, right? The optimal thing, profit how much you make based on prices. Okay, and there's nothing special, but I want to mention its property because sometimes when you write your model or run the regression based on this guy, right? Because you can observe this prices, it's public, right? And profit you can also observe as well. So this thing is econometrically is very nice because you see all the prices, right? Because profit is from the financial statement, right? And P, the price of the output, I think everybody can see that one, right? And W, maybe the wages and capital, I think you can also see that as well. You don't know how much unit they use, but you can see the price. It's not something terribly difficult, right? Unless they do some very secret input. Otherwise, something is very obvious. So that's why it's good to look at this because you want to estimate that as well, right? And the good is look at what kind of property you have, right? So suppose you want to estimate that, you run the regression, make sure that you satisfy this homogeneous in degree 1, right? And now you should be also thinking about this thing would apply as well, right? Should be increasing, right? If your regression tell you that the coefficient negative in prices or not the same sign as this expect, then your regression maybe have some error, right? Maybe you should not run, you should increase the, say, regression, right? You run the simple regression, it doesn't work, then you must have some quadratic term, right? Maybe more product term to make sure that everything looks nicely, right? So otherwise you would have some issue. So make sure that these things are satisfied. And there's some more property like convex in price P and convex in input price and output price, so which mean the same. So you should be able to make sure that your regression result will satisfy this. Okay, this is minimum checking to your regression. If you ever try to estimate the profit function, right? And also, and one thing probably asked is why you care about profit function, right? Why I want to estimate, because I saw the profit, right? And why I want to care about profit function, right? Because I can see the prices, I can see input price, output price, I can see the profit. Why I care about estimating that? Why? The answer lies on the last one, right? I want to estimate XI. I don't know how much. Maybe I can see Y. That's fine, right? I can see how much they produce, but I can't see the input they use because it's all a lot of time hidden, right? You may be able to see the labor, but the capital is unclear, right? So that is the very important part, is right. This is something Y can see, P can see, pi can see, but Xi may not be able to see, right? Or sometimes other way around. You see X, you see Y, but you can't see pi because the accountant are doing revenue management, doing some accounting tricks, right? So you don't know the pi, right? But you can see the Y, you can see the X, you can estimate pi, right? Because you can use the variation of W and P, right, to estimate the pi, right? So that's, you can go back out that thing. So that is have some implication, right? You can go back. Is that clear why we want to study this, right? We want to study all this property because it has, of course, in theory, you need to make sure that when you build the model, it should be right, because sometimes you start from the profit function, right? Later you see when we talk about game theory, we may start from the pi directly. There's some model that starts with pi, okay? And that's the reason, right? You make sure that your pi has meaningful, have to follow this kind of property. And second, econometrically, right? This is how we can estimate this. Or you can estimate this, go back and forth. Because something you can't see, something you can see, as long as you think the firm is maximizing profit, and this is the model you will see. Okay, I hope I convinced you why we go for this kind of questions. Not going to do the proof, okay? It's a profit function. Once you solve it out, you put it back, put everything optimal back to here, because the optimal result will give you the Y and X, right? The input and output, you put it back, solve this out, right? So from this equation, you can see, if you believe the production is like this, technology, which calculus is a good approximation, right? You can estimate the alphas, right? Because, right, then you know what the behavior, because you can observe W, observe P, observe pi, you can go back to the alphas. You can get, once you get the alpha, you can get everything, right? You can, because once you get the production function, you can get whatever. You can do a lot of stuff. So just a very minor note of how the minimization problem are related to the profit, right? So as I often said, there can be two-step procedure. You can do profit maximization once and for all, or you can do twice, okay? And very often you will see actually in game theory class as well, is we often do in this way, right? We start with the firm, okay? He is choosing output only, okay? And by doing that, we have assumed actually the cost function. That cost function comes from the cost minimization problem, okay? And this is usually what we see in a game theory class, okay? Is we will assume the cost function is there, okay? But I will tell you this is the same. If you solve in this way, you get the same result. So you can do a two-step procedure, which we do in game theory, or you can do it once and for all. Okay, I mean, this is just optimization problem, right? Just you do step by step, right? And then, or you do once and for all. Okay, and this will give us a very famous solution, right? Price equal to marginal cost. That's you learn in the undergraduate economics, right? It's even easier, right? Because you produce one more unit, this is how much you earned, marginal revenue. And this is how much it costs in money terms, right? So everything is money. so your mind doesn't twist too much, right? That's how you learn in undergrad. And to make sure that this is a simple calculus problem, right? One variable calculus, right? Why this is easier? Because this is just one variable calculus, right? Your life is very simple, right? The very, very first class of calculus. Choose the best y, right? And to make sure this is optimal, this cost function has to be concave, right? This how you learn the calculus class. And here we have almost n. I'm not going to talk too much, but you can do the short run thing as well, right? By holding some factor the same, right? And then explain what I said, right? Why in short run, some firm will shut down and some firm does not, right? Why some restaurants shut down during the tea break time, or some restaurant only not open in the morning, right? Why some restaurant close at the dinner time, right? So that is some reason you have shutdown problem here. You will not shut down as long as if your revenue is better than the short run cost, you still operate, right? So that's why some firm will still operate at loss. The reason is when they think, they don't think about total cost. They think about what they can change, right? If they can't change things, they cannot, right? That's why I said at the beginning, right? Why some woman still forgive his husband, right? When husband is having affairs, right? Because she did not think of the box, she keep the marriage there, right? And as long as the man pay the bill, maybe she's okay, right? All the way around, right? But that's happened, right? So, and that's why I said, right, this undergraduate class, right? The firm shut down when the price is below the average variable cost, then you shut down. Okay. So that is the thing there, but not the average cost. In the long run, the firm exit when the price is below the average cost. I think you learned it in the undergrad, right? The firm shut down when the price is below the average variable cost. Is that okay? I think this is something you learned already, so I'm not going to talk too much about that, and it's not very important for our calculation because the math is trivial, so I'm not going to talk about those. And this is the same as the SEP but change to short run. But instead, I want to point out the last 2 minutes about the welfare, which is one slide. Okay. So we want to know the welfare. We will define welfare of the firm, which he only cares about profit. So his welfare is very simple, just profit, right? This definition. I don't think anyone would be surprised to see this, right? He cares about profit. He don't care about anything else. Profit is what he needs. But now we go back to our undergraduate class. Okay. The output function is the supply function, right? And we say this market price, this is the producer surplus. Okay. Why? Because we prove in one slide, this is the profit. That's why that's why I call producer surplus. Different from consumer. For consumer case, that is not the right thing. Consumer surplus is not something that what consumer think they like. But for this, it's exactly the profit. So this is producer surplus is exactly correct. So there's no need to update your learning, okay, for firm. How we prove that is just from M.Phil theorem. Remember, we said the derivative is the output, right? So you integrate that, it's a profit. That's it. Nothing deep there. I mean, of course, you don't like the math, it's okay, but that is what it is, right? Integrate that. So producer surplus is the profit, okay? In that case, the area between the price and the supply curve is exactly what we want. Okay, so just to remind you, this y output function is supply curve in your undergrad. right? It's an individual supply curve, right? Because supply curve is quantity price is exactly the one you learn in the undergrad. Demand supply, right? There's a supply. And do remind yourself, now you are the PhD, you should know consumer surplus is not the right thing, but it's a good approximation, what we want to measure. Not the utility, but it's somewhere, if there's no income effect, that will be fine. But if the income effect, consumer surplus is not always the right measure. But for the firm, there's no income effect, right? So in that case, that's why the product surplus is exactly what we want. Okay, so we're done. I mean, although we are a little bit behind, 1 minute over, but we're done with topic 2. That means our TA will give you the assignment of 2. Okay, so, but do remind yourself tomorrow the deadline for topic 1. Okay, make sure that you submit. Okay, and then she will send out tomorrow, I guess. After your homework 1 is over, you can have fun for the weekend. So I see you next week. Have fun. Enjoy the homework too.